On our 10th year anniversary dinner, I stood in front of everyone with a black eye. The room went silent. My husband said proudly, "It's my sisters." They taught her some respect. His sisters laughed proudly, their eyes glinting with cruel pride. Then, my twin sister, Natalie, walked up to my husband and did something that shocked them all. I couldn't believe this was happening. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night where Brandon and I would put on the perfect act for everyone. But instead, it was like everything I'd tried to build over the last decade had been crumbled into dust right in front of me. I stood there, with my swollen eye throbbing, mascara running down my face, and the world around me seemed to freeze. 50 sets of eyes stared back at me, some with shock, others with confusion, and a few with pity. But it didn't matter. What mattered was Brandon's smile. That awful, smug, self-satisfied smile that made me sick to my stomach. His arm was wrapped around me, as if we were posing for a photo, like we were the perfect couple. As if nothing was wrong. And I hated him for it. I hated how easily he could pretend everything was fine when it was far from it. His sisters were standing behind us, barely containing their laughter. They exchanged glances, and their giggles were like daggers to my already broken spirit. I couldn't focus on the laughter though. I couldn't focus on the whispers from the other guests. All I could do was feel the sharp pain in my chest, the crushing weight of the years I'd spent trying to be what Brandon wanted, trying to be good enough. I tried to smile. I tried to pretend I was just a little clumsy, just a little careless, but the tears behind my eyes wouldn't stop threatening to spill over. But none of that mattered now, did it? Because as Brandon spoke, his words cut through the silence like a knife. "My beautiful wife had a little accident," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "It's not a big deal. It's just a small misunderstanding. My sisters, they taught her some respect." That was when the world around me seemed to shift. Like the ground beneath my feet was no longer steady. His sister's laughter only grew louder. Veronica raised her champagne glass, her eyes glinting with satisfaction, and Candace, always the worst, looked at me with a smirk that was almost too much to bear. I didn't know what was worse, the bruises on my face, or the fact that I had to stand there, in front of all these people, pretending like nothing had happened. Pretending that I wasn't the woman they had humiliated, broken, and beaten for the past 10 years. I was drowning in their pity, but more than that, I was drowning in my own shame. I didn't expect this. I thought I was still in control. I thought if I tried hard enough, if I played my part well enough, things would be fine. But they were never fine. Not really. As the silence stretched on, I could feel the eyes of the room on me, weighing me down. And I could feel Brandon, standing there with his arm around me, smiling like we were the picture of perfect marriage. He didn't care. He never cared. I didn't care anymore either. But then, just as I thought I would suffocate under the weight of my humiliation, the door to the dining room slammed open. Everyone turned, their heads swiveling in unison. The look on their faces as Natalie strode into the room was one I would never forget. It was a mix of surprise, confusion, and maybe, just maybe a little bit of fear. She didn't even look at me. She didn't need to. She walked straight past Brandon, ignoring him completely, and stood directly in front of him. Her eyes were burning with fury, her face set in a hard line, and I knew then that everything was about to change. "Brandon," she said, her voice calm, but filled with a power I hadn't heard in years. "You let your sisters beat my twin." Her words were simple, but they were like a bomb going off in the room. The guests stared, stunned into silence, while Brandon's smug expression faltered for the first time. His smile faded, and in that moment, I knew he was no longer in control. "You let them hurt her," Natalie continued, her voice louder now, each word hitting harder than the last. "And then you brought her here, to parade her injuries like it was some kind of game." Brandon stepped back, eyes darting around, trying to regain control, but Natalie was too powerful now. She wasn't backing down, and for the first time in 10 years, I realized something. I wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. Natalie wasn't about to let me stand there and be humiliated anymore. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the last time I ever had to pretend that I was fine. I had spent the past 3 days trying to make everything perfect. Brandon had been on edge, picking apart every detail of the anniversary plans, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, if I could get everything right, if I could make the dinner flawless, it would be enough to make him happy. But every time I thought I was close, something would fall apart. And that something always had a way of coming back to me. The kitchen was my battlefield. Spreadsheets for the seating arrangements, lists for the menu, the flowers, the music, it was all mapped out meticulously. I had thought through every detail, from the wine pairing to the centerpieces. Like I could control the night, like I could control him. But every time I caught a glimpse of Brandon's face, it was like I wasn't doing enough. "Grace, you're late again," he would say, his voice cool and dismissive. "We're supposed to leave in an hour." I'd be rushing around, trying to finish setting the table or making sure the wine was chilled, and he would stand there, arms crossed, as if every move I made was an offense. But I didn't argue. I just nodded, doing my best to hide my nerves. The worst part was his sisters. Veronica and Candace had become constant presences in our home. They came by at least 3 times a week now, barging into our kitchen like they owned the place. It was as if they were on a mission to point out everything I did wrong. I'd be cooking dinner, and Veronica would stand behind me, looking over my shoulder like I was a child. "Grace, are you really serving this for dinner?" she would ask, her voice dripping with judgment. "Brandon deserves better than this." Or Candace, standing in the hallway, arms crossed, saying, "Grace, you've gotten so thin. Are you trying to make our brother look bad by looking sick?" I had tried to ignore them, tried to stay focused on my mission to please everyone. But nothing was ever good enough. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop feeling like a failure. And then, 2 nights before the anniversary, it happened. Brandon's family came over for dinner. I had spent all day in the kitchen, making his favorite meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the works. The house was spotless, everything in place. And I had even put on the dress Brandon had approved that morning. I had tried so hard to look perfect for him. But then, just as I was pouring wine, my hand started to shake. Veronica had made one of her usual comments, this time about the chicken being dry, and I could feel the anger rising in me. I wasn't good enough, not in their eyes. My hand slipped slightly as I poured the wine, and just a few drops splashed onto Veronica's white dress. She jumped up from the table, shrieking like I had set her on fire. "This dress costs $3,000. Grace, you stupid, clumsy idiot." I froze. The wine bottle was still in my hand, the red liquid spreading across her dress like a stain on my dignity. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and my face burned with humiliation. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, trying to clean it up with napkins. "I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll get you a new dress." But Brandon didn't come to my defense. He just stood there, his cold eyes fixed on me. "Grace, you're so careless," he said, his voice low and disappointed. "Can't you do anything right?" I felt the tears start to sting, but I held them back. Crying wouldn't help, it never did. So I stayed silent as I cleaned up the mess, my heart sinking with each apology I uttered. That night, Brandon didn't even say goodnight. He just took his pillow and went to sleep in the guest room. I knew it was because I had embarrassed him. It was my fault, as always. The next day, I tried to make it right. I went shopping for a new dress, hoping I could at least get one thing right. I chose a dark blue dress with delicate beading, something I thought Brandon would like. It was expensive, more than I wanted to spend, but I didn't care. I just wanted him to approve. When I got home, Candace was in the living room, waiting for me. She had a key to our house, given to her by Brandon without asking me, and she was sitting there, that smug look on her face. She glanced at the shopping bags I was carrying, and a nasty smile spread across her lips. "New dress, huh?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Trying to impress people, are we? You know, everyone just feels sorry for Brandon, right? Being married to someone like you." I bit my tongue, refusing to let her see how much her words hurt. I tried to ignore her, but as I went upstairs to hang up the dress, I could feel her eyes on me, following my every move. When I came back into the room 5 minutes later, I froze. The dress was ruined. There was a large bleach stain down the front of it, the blue fabric blotched with white spots. I stared at it for a moment, disbelief creeping in. Candace was standing beside the dress, her fake innocent expression plastered on her face, a bottle of cleaning spray in her hand. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I was just trying to help clean your room. My bad." I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. That dress had cost me $200, money I'd saved from my small teaching salary, and now it was ruined. Candace had done it on purpose, and there was no denying it. "Why would you do that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why do you hate me so much?" Her expression faltered for a split second before the smirk returned. "Because you're not good enough for this family," she said coldly. "You're weak and pathetic, and you make my brother look bad. You need to learn your place, Grace." I just stared at her, my mind spinning. How had it come to this? How had I let myself be treated like this for so long? When Brandon came home, and I showed him the ruined dress, I hoped, just for a moment, that he would defend me, that he would see what his sister had done. But instead, he sighed, like I was exhausting him. "Grace, you're being too sensitive," he said, brushing it off. "Candace said it was an accident. Why do you always have to cause drama with my family?" I couldn't take it anymore. I had tried so hard to be the wife he wanted, to be the woman his family could accept. But it was never enough. I nodded, said nothing, and apologized for being upset. That's what I always did. Apologize, stay quiet, try harder. But no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to be good enough. 2 nights before the anniversary, Brandon's family came over for dinner. The evening was supposed to be a reprieve from everything else, an opportunity for me to prove I could be a part of this family, to show I could handle the pressure, that I could make things work. But as usual, nothing went as planned. I had spent all day preparing, cooking Brandon's favorite meal, cleaning the house until every corner sparkled, setting the table with our nicest dishes. I even wore the dress he had approved that morning, the one he said looked nice on me. I didn't dare wear anything else. The effort had to be perfect, down to the last detail, and still, I felt that tight knot in my chest that told me it wouldn't be enough. The dinner started out fine enough. Brandon's parents were there, along with his sisters. I did my best to keep the conversation going, trying to ignore the way Veronica and Candace made occasional, cutting remarks about the house or my cooking. Everything they said stung, but I kept my smile on, pretending not to notice. I was used to it by now. At one point, I was pouring wine for Veronica. My hand trembled slightly, and I didn't think much of it at first. But then, as I tilted the bottle, a small splash of wine hit the edge of her white dress. Not even that much, just a few drops. I froze, and in that moment, the room seemed to stop. Veronica stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, her face going red. "This dress cost $3,000. She screamed, her voice sharp enough to cut through the air. "You clumsy, stupid idiot." I immediately began apologizing, my hands trembling as I grabbed napkins to clean up the small spill. "I'm so sorry, Veronica. It was an accident. Please let me pay for the cleaning. I'll replace the dress." But instead of hearing any comfort, all I got was silence from Brandon. He didn't even speak up to tell his sister it was an accident. His eyes just narrowed. And he looked at me with a level of disappointment I could feel like a physical weight. "Grace, you're so careless," he muttered, his tone cold and final. "Can't you do anything right?" His words stung worse than Veronica's anger. I could feel the tears building, but I blinked them back. I couldn't cry. Not here, not in front of everyone. I could only stand there, trying to fix the mess, trying to make everything go away. I finished cleaning up and sat back down, my face flushed. But the silence that followed felt worse than the argument had. Brandon didn't even look at me after that. He just ate his dinner like nothing was wrong. I sat there in silence, forcing myself to swallow my food, pretending like everything was fine. But inside, I was breaking. That night, when we got home, Brandon didn't even say goodnight. He grabbed his pillow and walked out of our bedroom without a word. I didn't understand it at first. I wanted to say something, to ask why he was so angry, why he wasn't there to comfort me, but I knew better. Asking would just make things worse. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the tears finally coming, hot and steady. I had tried. I had really tried to make everything perfect for him. But nothing I did was ever good enough. I wasn't good enough. And in the silence of that room, I could feel it. the slow erosion of whatever had been left of us, of whatever hope I had that things might get better. I wasn't the woman Brandon wanted, and I hadn't been for a long time. It was like I could hear the sound of everything falling apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, I woke up to the same knot in my stomach. The anniversary was just a day away, and I knew things wouldn't be any better, not with Brandon acting like this. I couldn't change him. I couldn't fix this, but I still tried to push the doubt out of my mind. I had to make the anniversary dinner perfect. I had to make it work. I went shopping for a new dress, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I could fix everything by making sure I looked exactly the way he wanted. I picked out a dark blue dress with delicate beading, something that felt elegant but not too flashy. It was more than I should have spent, but I was desperate. I wanted him to be proud of me, for once. I wanted him to see me the way he used to, but when I came home and walked into the living room, Candace was sitting there, waiting for me. She looked at me with that smug expression she always wore, as if she knew something I didn't. "You've been out shopping?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Trying to impress people, are we?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. What was there to say? She had a way of twisting everything, making it feel like I was doing something wrong when I wasn't. So, I just nodded, trying to ignore her, as I went upstairs with the shopping bags. But when I came back down just a few minutes later, the dress was ruined. There was a huge bleach stain on it. The blue fabric now blotched with white spots. I stood there in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Candace stood next to the dress, looking completely innocent. "Oops," she said, like it was no big deal. "I was just cleaning your room, trying to help you out." My bad. It was no accident. I could see it in her eyes, in the way her lips curved into a barely concealed smirk. She had done this on purpose. She had ruined the dress, just like she ruined everything else in my life. "Why would you do that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why do you hate me so much?" Her smile faded, but the coldness remained. "Because you're not good enough for this family," she spat. "You make my brother look weak. You don't deserve him. You need to learn your place." I stood there, frozen. My throat closed up, and I couldn't find the words to respond. The weight of her words, the cruelty in her tone, it was too much. And that was when I knew. I wasn't going to survive this. I wasn't going to win. No matter how hard I tried, it would never be enough. I was just a visitor in their world, a guest who had overstayed her welcome, and I would always be beneath them. The morning of our anniversary, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. I could hear Brandon moving downstairs, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he would come up and remind me of my inadequacies. Just like he always did. The tension from the night before still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I didn't understand why everything had to feel so strained between us. I didn't understand why it was never enough. I dragged myself out of bed, feeling the dull ache in my muscles from the sleepless night. My reflection in the mirror startled me. The hollow look in my eyes, the weight I had lost over the past year, it was all there, clear as day. I was barely holding myself together. But I had to keep going, had to get through today. It was our anniversary, after all. I tried to force a smile, even though it felt like a lie. I got dressed in the older dress I had worn before, one I knew Brandon wouldn't criticize. It wasn't the dark blue one I'd bought for today. That dress was ruined, and there was no point in wearing it now. Candace had made sure of that. My hands shook slightly as I put on my makeup, carefully covering the dark circles under my eyes. But no amount of concealer could hide the exhaustion that had taken over me. As I finished getting ready, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, surprised to see a message from Natalie. We hadn't talked much in the past few days. Brandon had made it clear that he didn't like me spending time on the phone with her. He didn't like anyone telling me what I should or shouldn't do. But I missed her. I missed the comfort of her voice, the one person who had always understood me. Hey Nat. Happy anniversary, Gracie. I smiled softly at the message, but then I heard Brandon's voice from downstairs, sharp and impatient. Grace, he called. I could feel my stomach twist. I needed to be downstairs. I had no choice. It was always like this, always his schedule, his rules, his timing. I put the phone down, quickly typing a short reply. Thanks, Nat. I'll call you later. As I walked downstairs, I could hear the sound of Brandon talking to his sisters, his voice low and clipped. Veronica and Candace were already here, and the usual tension that came with their presence was palpable. They weren't just visiting anymore. They were here to monitor me, to make sure I didn't step out of line. Their eyes were on me as I entered the room, and I could already feel their judgment weighing on me, even before I said a word. I tried to act normal, tried to smile and make small talk, but nothing felt normal. It wasn't just the bruises on my face that I had to hide, though they were impossible to ignore. It was everything. The constant scrutiny, the criticism, the feeling that no matter what I did, I was always falling short. I moved around the kitchen, making sure everything was just right. The food was perfect, the table was set, and the wine was chilled. Everything was perfect, except for the way I felt. Nothing could change the emptiness in my chest. Nothing could change the constant ache of knowing that I wasn't enough for them. Not for Brandon, not for his family, and certainly not for myself. And then, just as I was starting to plate the food, Candace walked into the kitchen. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me with that smug expression she always wore. The air in the room grew colder. I could feel the tension rise, just like every other time she had made her little comments about me, about how I wasn't good enough. Grace, you really need to get a grip, she said, her tone biting. You look like a wreck. Are you really planning to go out like that? I didn't even turn to face her. I kept my eyes focused on the plates, trying to ignore the sting of her words. It was always like this. The subtle digs. The cruel, passive, aggressive remarks. They were part of the routine now. It didn't matter how much I tried to ignore it, how much I tried to be perfect, nothing would ever change. I forced a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. I'm fine, Candace. Thanks for the concern. She snorted, clearly unconvinced. You always say that. But you look like you're falling apart. Honestly, it's embarrassing. Brandon deserves better than this. Her words hit harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how deeply the weight of her judgment had sunk into my skin. I clenched my jaw, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. I had nothing left to say to her. There was no point in defending myself. I had tried for years, but it was always the same. I wasn't good enough, and I never would be. Before I could say anything else, Brandon's voice cut through the silence. Grace, you're taking too long. We need to leave soon. Everything's ready. I nodded, forcing myself to look at him, though my heart was heavy in my chest. I had never seen him look at me with anything but disappointment lately. Every glance, every word felt like a reminder that I had failed. Yeah, I said softly. Everything's ready. He didn't even acknowledge my words. He just turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, with the weight of his indifference on my shoulders. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to push down the tears, trying to hold it together. For the rest of the night, I would pretend. I would wear the mask I had worn for so long, the one that said I was fine. I was happy. I was perfect. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. The day before the anniversary, I woke up to a heavy silence hanging over the house. Brandon had already left for work, but the tension from last night lingered like a storm cloud. I moved through the house in a daze, trying to ignore the dread settling in my stomach. The thought of the anniversary dinner gnawed at me. Everything was supposed to be perfect, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just one step away from falling apart. I decided to go shopping for a new dress. It was the only thing I could control right now, something I could do to make myself feel better, to fix the mess that my life had become. I needed something Brandon would approve of. I needed to look good for him, even if I didn't feel good inside. The store was quiet when I walked in. I wandered between the racks, my fingers lightly grazing the fabric, trying to find something that felt like it could fix me. I ended up choosing a dark blue dress, something sleek and elegant with delicate beading. It was beautiful, more than I wanted to spend. But I thought Brandon would like it. Maybe this time, maybe this dress would be the one that made everything okay. When I returned home, the house felt empty, but I was used to it by now. Brandon's absence only made the weight of the space around me feel heavier. I headed upstairs with the shopping bags, relieved to be alone for a moment. But when I entered the bedroom, there she was. Candace. She was standing by the bed, her arms crossed, a smug smile curling at her lips. Her gaze flicked down to the shopping bags in my hands, and I already knew what was coming. New dress. Huh. She said, her voice sharp and laced with mockery. You think this is going to impress people, Grace? You think that's what's going to make everything okay? I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words were lodged in my throat, a lump I couldn't swallow. I had no energy to fight her, not today. I was already exhausted from the constant back and forth, the criticisms, the relentless tension in every corner of my life. I went to hang up the dress in the closet, trying to ignore her presence. But she didn't let up. You really need to get a grip, she continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. You look like a mess, Grace. Are you planning to go out like that? Honestly, it's embarrassing. I could feel her eyes on me as I tried to hang the dress with shaking hands. I couldn't escape her judgment. Every time I tried, It felt like I was sinking deeper into quicksand. I didn't look at her. I kept my head down, focusing on the task in front of me. The simple act of hanging the dress, as if it could somehow give me control over something, anything. But it didn't work. The dress hung there, beautiful and pristine, while I stood there, broken. When I turned to face her, the look on Candace's face was something I had come to expect. It was cold, calculating, and unrelenting. You know, she said, her tone dripping with disdain, Brandon deserves better than you. You've been a burden on him for years. And you still can't get it right. Her words stung in ways I couldn't explain. Every insult, every criticism from her and Veronica, every harsh glance from Brandon, felt like a constant erosion of everything I had once been. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I was just. I don't even know anymore. I didn't respond to her. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I knew I'd break down, and I wasn't ready for that. So, I stayed silent, feeling the weight of her words press down on me. I don't know why you even try, Candace continued, her voice lowering to a cruel whisper. You think this family's going to accept you. You think you'll ever be good enough for Brandon. You're not. I was already shaking by the time she finished speaking, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction, I wasn't going to let her see how much her words hurt me. And then, as if the universe was testing me, something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the exhaustion from trying to be perfect for too long. Maybe it was the weight of all the years of criticism and emotional abuse. But I couldn't take it anymore. Why do you do this? I finally asked, my voice hoarse with emotion. Why do you hate me so much? Candace's face didn't change. There was no softness, no compassion. Just cold, unrelenting disdain. Because you don't belong here, she spat. You're not part of this family. You're weak, Grace. You're nothing but a guest who's overstayed her welcome. I could feel the tears threatening to spill. But I held them back. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she was destroying me, but I didn't. I couldn't. There was no point. Just go, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Just leave me alone. But she didn't leave. She stood there, watching me with that smug look on her face. And just like that, the last ounce of strength I had left drained out of me. I had tried so hard to fit in. I had bent myself into someone I didn't recognize just to make Brandon's family accept me, But it would never be enough. I would always be the outsider, the one who didn't belong. Candace finally left, but the damage had been done. I stood in that room, feeling smaller than I ever had before. I had been trying to fix something that wasn't broken, trying to please people who would never be satisfied. It didn't matter how hard I worked, how hard I tried to make things perfect. I would never be enough. I looked at the dress hanging in the closet, the one I had bought for tonight, and suddenly, the thought of wearing it seemed pointless. The night was already ruined. The anniversary, the dinner, it all felt like a lie. The doorbell rang downstairs, snapping me out of my thoughts. I wiped my face, taking one last look in the mirror, before walking downstairs, preparing myself for the inevitable. The anniversary dinner was about to begin. And I had no idea how I would survive it. When I stepped out of the car, my legs felt like they were made of lead. I couldn't seem to get my footing right. But Brandon's arm around my shoulders was firm, almost too firm, as if he was holding me together with his grip alone. The cold air bit at my skin, but it wasn't enough to numb the terror running through me. Every step toward the restaurant felt heavier, like I was walking toward my own execution. Inside, the private dining room was beautifully lit, the soft glow of chandeliers reflecting off the glassware and silver cutlery. It looked like any other celebration. Smiling faces, the clinking of champagne glasses, soft laughter, the scent of expensive perfume and food. But for me, everything felt wrong. The moment we entered, I could feel every single pair of eyes on me. The air seemed to thicken, as if everyone knew something they weren't saying. My bruises, swollen eye, and the cut on my cheek were a stark contrast to the pristine atmosphere. I tried to smile, but it felt like the muscles in my face had forgotten how. I could see Brandon's family, his business partners, even my own parents already gathered at the long table. Their polite conversations came to a screeching halt when they saw me. I heard a gasp. Someone's champagne glass trembled, but no one dared speak up. They just stared, their faces frozen in disbelief. I felt the weight of their judgment bearing down on me, the pity in their eyes making my skin crawl. But Brandon didn't care. He smiled. No, he beamed, as if this was all part of the show. His arm tightened around my shoulders, pulling me closer to his side. The moment felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life play out before me. This wasn't my reality. This couldn't be happening. But it was. Welcome, everyone, Brandon's voice rang out, booming across the room as if nothing was amiss. He didn't even flinch when a few heads turned away, uncomfortable. Tonight's a celebration of family, of love, of a decade of marriage to my beautiful wife. His hand slid down my arm possessively, and I nearly flinched, but I forced myself to stay still. I had no choice. He had made sure of that. I could feel the temperature drop as I stood there, rooted to the spot. The sound of glasses clinking. Low murmurs in the background. It was as if the world was carrying on, but I was stuck in this suspended moment, where nothing felt real. His family was behind us, the silent witnesses to what had happened before, the violence, the betrayal. Veronica and Candace were standing close by, wearing their usual smug smiles, as if this was some kind of twisted game they were enjoying. Grace, Brandon said softly, leaning in, his breath hot against my ear. You look beautiful tonight. You'd better not mess this up. Smile. I didn't answer. What could I say? What was left to say? I was standing here, in front of everyone, with my eyes swelling shut, trying to keep it together. I wanted to scream, to run out of there, but I didn't. I stood, forced a smile, and kept my eyes trained ahead of me, trying not to let anyone see how much I was breaking inside. And then it happened. The door to the dining room slammed open, and for a split second, everyone turned to look. I could hear the shuffle of footsteps, the murmur of surprise, but it wasn't until I saw her that I understood why. Natalie. My twin sister stood in the doorway, her presence a force to be reckoned with. Her hair was wild, strands flying from the wind outside, and she wore a leather jacket and jeans, completely out of place in the elegant room. But it wasn't her clothes that made everyone's heads turn. It was the way she carried herself. With every step she took, the tension in the room shifted, as if the ground beneath us had been moved. Brandon's expression faltered for just a second, but he quickly masked it with that practiced smile. "Natalie," he said, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" Natalie didn't even look at him. She didn't acknowledge his presence at all. Her eyes were locked on me, and in that moment, I felt the weight of everything, the abuse, the control, the manipulation, lifted, just a little. She had come for me. "You let your sisters beat my twin," Natalie said, her voice calm, but every word was a sharp knife, cutting through the air. The room was silent. The shock on Brandon's face was enough to make my heart race. He wasn't in control anymore. He couldn't stop what was about to happen. "You let them hurt her," Natalie continued, her voice growing louder, stronger, like she was taking charge of the space. "And then you brought her here to humiliate her in front of everyone." The guests were still, the entire room frozen in place. I could hear the soft shuffle of feet as people shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what was happening. But Natalie didn't care about them. She only cared about me. Brandon stepped back, eyes darting around, trying to regain control, but it was too late. Natalie wasn't backing down. She had already made her decision. "You think you're going to get away with this?" Natalie's voice was steady, fierce. "You think you're going to keep hurting her, making her feel small, and there won't be consequences?" She turned toward Veronica and Candace, who were standing by, still in their smug little bubble of superiority. "You slapped her, didn't you, Veronica? You humiliated her, and you're proud of it." Veronica's face went red, her eyes flicking to Brandon, but she didn't speak. "Answer her, Natalie demanded, taking a step closer. Veronica stammered, her face turning a shade darker, but Natalie wasn't giving her an inch. "You need to answer, Veronica. Did you slap her?" Veronica opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Natalie's hand shot out, faster than anyone could process. The slap rang through the room, sharp and loud, a sudden crack of justice. Veronica stumbled backward, shock and disbelief written all over her face. The champagne glass she'd been holding shattered on the floor, the sound cutting through the stunned silence. "You hit me!" Veronica shrieked, clutching her cheek. "You needed to understand what it feels like," Natalie said, her voice low and cold, a calm fury that I had never seen before. "Now you know." Candace, livid, charged at Natalie, but before she could even reach her, Natalie sidestepped, a practiced move, and Candace went flying into the buffet table. She hit the edge hard, her body crumpling to the floor with a loud thud. Candace groaned, blood trickling from the cut above her eyebrow, and, as she looked up, her face was already swelling, the bruises starting to form. I stood there, frozen in shock, unable to process what had just happened. But deep down, I knew. This was it. This was the moment that everything changed. Brandon opened his mouth to speak, his face pale, but his voice was weak, desperate. "Call the police," he shouted, pointing at Natalie. "She assaulted my sisters. She's attacking my family." Natalie didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone and held it high, the camera pointing toward him. "I've been recording since I walked in," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "This entire room heard you admit that your sisters attacked Grace. You heard them laugh about it. You're not getting away with this." Brandon froze. His face was no longer confident. No longer the man who controlled everything. Now, he was just a man standing in the middle of his own destruction. Natalie turned to the room, making eye contact with everyone. Every one of you saw what happened here, she said. You witnessed it. And now, we're going to make sure the world knows what this family really is. In that moment, I knew. Everything had changed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't alone anymore. The room was in chaos. Brandon's voice rose in pitch, desperation creeping in as he tried to control the situation. But it was clear, he couldn't. His lies, his manipulation, everything he had hidden behind that perfect mask was falling apart right in front of him. You've all seen it. He shouted, his voice cracking. She attacked my sisters. She assaulted them in front of everyone. His eyes were frantic, searching for any ally, any hand to pull him out of the mess he'd created. But no one moved. Natalie stood her ground, phone in hand, calmly recording every word. Brandon, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. You told everyone that your sisters taught Grace respect, didn't you? You admitted it. We all heard it. And the truth was out there now, hanging in the air like a weight. Brandon had been cornered. And the worst part was, he knew it. He could try to spin the story, but he couldn't erase the fact that his own words had condemned him. His sisters had done what they did with his blessing, his approval. But now, there was no way to hide from it. No way to shift the blame. I didn't mean it like that. He sputtered, his hands flying in wild motions, trying to control the narrative. But the more he spoke, the less convincing he became. This is all just a misunderstanding. You didn't misunderstand anything. Natalie cut him off, her voice a quiet fury. You watched them hurt your wife. You let them humiliate her, and you stood there and did nothing. Brandon's gaze flicked to the ground, shame seeping in. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. His mask had slipped, and there was no coming back from it. His face flushed a deep red as his jaw clenched, his fingers twitching at his sides. He stopped, then tried to move toward me. But his words trailed off as he took a step forward and realized something. He no longer held any power here. I had spent years in this house, suffocated by the silence he had imposed, by the control he'd had over every aspect of my life. And now, standing in front of me, he was nothing but a man who had lost everything. Stay away from me, I whispered. But my voice carried across the room with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. It was quiet, but it was firm. Brandon's hand hung in the air, frozen. He wasn't sure how to react anymore. He was always the one in control, the one who dictated how things went. But now, the tables had turned. And no matter how many times he tried to make excuses, he couldn't rewrite what had happened. You don't get to talk to me like that, he said, his voice low, a last attempt to assert some kind of authority. But even he knew it was weak. Don't I? I responded, meeting his gaze with cold clarity. You lost your right to speak to me, like that a long time ago, Brandon. You just didn't know it yet. For a long moment, no one moved. Veronica was still on the floor, clutching her cheek where Natalie had slapped her. Candace was sitting against the buffet table, her hand pressed to her swelling forehead, eyes wide with shock. Their expressions were a mixture of disbelief and fury, but they were too afraid to speak. They knew that their precious brother, the one they had supported, was no longer their hero. He had no more power over me, and they saw it. I could feel my parents behind me now. They hadn't said much through all of this, but their presence was enough. They were standing with me, supporting me in a way I had never felt before. My father, once so gentle and passive, had stepped in between Brandon and me, a silent protector. He stood there, his face hard and steady, no longer the man who avoided confrontation. He was ready to defend me. "If you touch either of my daughters," my father said, his voice even and unwavering, "you'll have to go through me first." Brandon took a step back, eyes wide, his chest rising and falling in short bursts, as if he was struggling to breathe. My mother was beside my father, her arm around him, a silent show of unity. They had been watching all along, and I had never known. They had known what Brandon had been doing to me, and they had been preparing, quietly gathering evidence. Preparing for the moment when I would be ready to walk away. I had never seen my parents like this. They weren't afraid anymore. They weren't pretending everything was fine. They were here for me now, in a way they had never been before. My mother stepped forward, her voice soft but sure. "We've been building a case," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself, waiting for Grace to be ready. Waiting for the right moment. I stared at her in disbelief. They knew. They had known all along, and they hadn't abandoned me. The evidence, the recordings, the photographs, everything I had thought was hidden was right there in front of me. "We've already spoken to a lawyer," my mother continued, her voice unwavering now. "We have enough for a restraining order and a strong divorce case. You're not going back to him, Grace. Not ever again." The weight of those words hit me like a ton of bricks, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long: hope. Real hope. Not the false kind I had been clinging to all this time, but something tangible, something that promised freedom. Brandon opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He was scrambling now, trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left, but the look on his face, frantic, desperate, told me everything I needed to know. He was done. My father reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to Natalie. She opened it, her face unreadable as she looked through the contents. The evidence. The proof. Everything that would make sure Brandon would never get away with what he'd done to me. "This is for you," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now, Grace. No one's ever going to hurt you again." The door behind us suddenly opened, and I heard footsteps approaching. The energy in the room shifted. Everyone was staring at Brandon now, waiting for his next move. But he didn't make a move. I could hear Brandon's voice shaking with anger, but this time, it didn't matter. His control was gone. His power was gone. And for the first time in my life, I was standing on my own 2 feet, not because of him, but in spite of him. "I'm done," I said, finally breaking the silence, my voice steady and clear. "This marriage is over." Brandon's face twisted in fury. But he didn't say a word. He knew, deep down, that he had lost. The last remnants of his control over me shattered in that moment. My sister Natalie stepped forward, taking my hand, leading me away from him. My parents followed, their presence a silent testament to the love and protection they were offering me. As we walked past Brandon, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already walked away from him in my heart a long time ago. We were leaving, and this time, there was no going back. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Everything was moving so fast, and yet, in the quiet moments, time seemed to slow down. I was still adjusting to the shock of it all. Still trying to process the fact that I had walked away from my life with Brandon. That I had actually made it out. I had spent 10 years trapped in a cage of his making, and now, for the first time, I was free. I moved into a small apartment near Natalie's place. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night I stayed there, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too big, the silence too loud. I could hear the echoes of the life I'd left behind, the insults, the control, the lies. But slowly, over the days and weeks, the noises faded. I could breathe again. I could think again. I wasn't drowning in fear every time the phone rang or when someone knocked on the door. I wasn't always wondering if I had done something wrong, if I had messed up somehow. I was just me. And that felt like a revolution. I started teaching again at a local school near my parents'. It was small, not glamorous, but it was a start. I had always loved teaching, always found joy in helping others, but I hadn't realized just how much of myself I had lost over the years until I stepped back into that classroom. It wasn't just the job. It was the people, the feeling of being seen, of being valued. It was like I was reawakening, piece by piece. I had a few good days and a few bad days. Some mornings, I would wake up and forget that the abuse had happened. Forget that I was still healing. Then something would remind me. My reflection in the mirror. The way my heart raced when I heard a knock on the door. The bruises had faded, but the scars were still there, invisible to the world, but present in every thought, every movement. I started to paint again. Something I had given up long ago, because Brandon had called it a waste of time. I found an old canvas in the corner of the apartment, one that I had never touched, and I began to paint. It was freeing, cathartic. The first painting I did was of two women, identical in appearance, but standing in completely different ways. One was crouched low, hurt, and afraid, while the other stood tall, protective, strong. I titled it, At Twin Flames. It was my way of expressing what had happened to me, what I had become. The woman who was hurt, who was weak, and the woman who had learned to stand up for herself, to fight back. One evening, Natalie came over with Chinese food, and we sat on the floor eating straight from the containers, like we used to when we were kids. It felt so normal, so simple, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was faking it. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was just okay. You're doing really well, Natalie said between bites, her voice warm and full of pride. I'm proud of you, Gracie. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the tears welling up. I don't even know how I got here, I whispered. It still feels like a dream, like any minute I'm going to wake up, and it'll all be a lie. She set down her food and reached out, squeezing my hand. It's not a dream, Gracie. It's real. You're free. You're strong. You've made it through everything. You've survived. And you're not alone. The weight of her words hit me hard. I had been so afraid of losing everything, but in the end, I had gained so much more. The love of my family, the strength of my sister, The courage to stand up for myself. I wasn't broken anymore. That night, I got a message from Jennifer, the woman who had been at the anniversary dinner. She had been watching everything unfold, and it had been the moment that made her realize she didn't have to stay in her own abusive marriage. She was leaving, and she wanted to talk. She asked if I could help her, guide her through it. I sat there, staring at the screen of my phone for a long time. It was strange, the idea of helping someone else, of offering them the same support Natalie had given me. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew I had to be there for her, because I had been where she was. I had felt trapped, like there was no way out. But now, I could offer her the one thing I had never had a way out. I typed a quick response, telling her I would meet her the next day. And just like that, I was helping someone else find the freedom I had fought so hard for. I had spent so many years hiding, pretending everything was fine, trying to make everyone else happy, losing myself in the process. But now, I was finally living for me, And as I sat there, holding Natalie's hand, as I thought about Jennifer and the woman I was becoming, I realized that the worst part of my life had finally ended. And the best part, it was just beginning. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. And no one, not Brandon, not Veronica, not Candace, no one would ever take that from me again. I was free. And nothing was going to stop me from living my life the way I wanted to. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in so long, I didn't fear it. I welcomed it. It was mine to shape, and I would shape it into something beautiful,